One of the favorite sayings of my soon to be 98-year-old mother is that when we plan, God laughs. And this gets to the height of the essence of fate itself, namely its fickleness and its unpredictability. For we can, for the most part, not predict what's going to happen 1 year from now, let alone 1 minute from now. You're here today, gone tomorrow. And this makes the idea of planning this and planning that with such certainty sort of silly or useless exercise and vanity. Now, one of the things about being a historian, a transit historian, is you get to see things, structures, vehicles that were built long, long before you were born. I'm almost 60 years old, and I find it fascinating when I ride a vehicle built long ago or ride the L in New York, Chicago, or the Wuppertal Streetbahn. I, I find it fascinating in the sense that I wonder about the people who lived and worked on these lines before they were built, when they were built, and right after they were built. What were they like? What were their conditions? Where did they work? Where did they play? How did they live? And it makes me self conscious in the sense that as alive as I am right now, they who were long dead were alive in their time. That reality is a matter of the present. We are in the here and now. And just because we are gone does not change that fact. Because, of course, one day people will see the things we saw, the things that moved us, and wonder what type of people we were. How did we behave as individuals and so forth? And, of course, there is the unpredictability of fate. People just going about their business and being gone the next for ever rhyme or reason. We talk about disasters on trains, airplanes going down, and so forth. And we quickly forget that the lives lost were just as viable as our own. A lot of disasters are forgotten, most are. Um, who remembers the victims of the plane crashes in the early part of the 20th century, or most of it? Who remembers the victims of train crashes, of boat sinkings, if they're not named the Titanic or the Lusitania? But you're still talking about people there whose lives were disrupted, ended, whose families were left to grieve. And one of the things you come across when you do research for these lines, you go into these neighborhoods, you get a sense of what things were like. And during your research, you come across incidents that are largely forgotten, or pretty much all forgotten. And one such incident involved the Brooklyn Broadway L, no less. This L opened in up to Rodriguez and Marcy Avenue in June of 1888. But of course, it had been under construction for well over a year. And on February 14th, Valentine's Day, it was just a regular normal day. It was a couple of months before the great blizzard we all talk about of 1888 that buried New York. February 14th. What was the significance of that? Well, the L was being constructed, 640 block of it, on Broadway over Fair Street. Still there, still runs there. And you had a horsecar line riding under it. And in those days, you had platforms containing steam derricks, which were acted as cranes. And what they would do is once the columns and cross beams were erected, they would lift these stringers, the long longitudinal pieces of steel that would hold the tracks into place. And on this morning at around 9:40, that was happening. But as the crane was lifting up the stringers, a horse car just happened to be passing underneath, and that's when it gave way. Everything collapsed and fell to the street. The stringers, the steam derrick, and landed smack dab on the top of this horse car, crushing it. Wooden vehicle just flattened it. And as a result, at least 4 to 6 people were killed and about 2 dozen were injured. Yes, it was a gruesome scene. The motorman was decapitated and the others were disemboweled. It was just as grisly an accident as you can imagine. And of course, the local papers, even papers in London, reported on it at the time. What made it worse was it was a result of clear negligence. In other words, people tried to cut corners and instead of doing their jobs right. And what had happened earlier, the same type of accident occurred 2 months earlier along the same route, barely missing a horse car and its passengers. So all of this is to say, people died who didn't have to die. And as a result, people with the last names of Minder, Kirshner, Macaulay, Clark, and Friel lost their lives for no reason at all, as what happened before, and it happened many, many times throughout the world. Now, nobody has any idea who these people are. Michael Macaulay, Charles Kirshner, Patrick Clark, and so forth. But they meant something to somebody then. And it is highly possible that they mean something to their descendants now, because somewhere in New York, a headstone carries their names, their dates, their birth, and their deaths. And it is important, I believe, if we are to maintain faith with our common humanity, to remember whenever we have the opportunity, those lost, especially those needlessly lost. And as a transit podcaster, I felt it would be irresponsible for me not to make mention of this as I begin these series of podcasts. I'm not going to know everything. I'm not going to be able to read it. But what I find out, I'm going to share, especially when it involves human beings, because ultimately, transit is about people. People who live and die along lots of people who have built these things. You talk about the Melbourne Street disaster of Brooklyn, the Times Square disaster, 1928, which killed about 14. Of course, Melbourne took out 100. Construction accidents that occurred during the construction of the New York subway system, from the dynamite explosion at a wooden depot on the street in 1900, 1901, and the collapse of a street on Broadway, which sent a streetcar tumbling into it. We talk about all those things. But there was a human cost to constructing these structures as well. Not as widely known. Again, we think of train disasters, a train going off the tracks, or in the case of an L falling into the street, like happened in New York on several occasions, and in Chicago in 1977. We talk about that when you think about the lives lost, because they're more, it's more significant. But in this case, it was a catastrophe in its own right that has sadly been forgotten. A case where human negligence caused a derrick, a crane, to fall into the street on top of a horse car. We just happened to have the misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, the 640 block, that is the address, Fayette Street, Broadway is still there. The L still runs there. And it's very likely that the stringers in that area are the very ones that fell to the ground that day and killed all those people. The picture I included was very close to the area where the accident happened. And since I became aware of it, I've looked at the photographs of that line with a certain reverence, because it was a place where people lost their lives needlessly. And even though you can't maintain a memorial every place someone checks out, it is good to remember. It's good to bow your heads that, but for the grace of God, go I. For who is to say that we will not perish in some unexpected event like they did? The victims of that disaster did not, of course, anticipate being killed that day when they were taking a horse car to work or riding it, as the case was with the operator, missionary, I think it was Minder, who was killed. And of course, now, who knows their names? Nobody really. But they should be remembered now, and they're going to be remembered now. Innocent victims of a long ago accident. The fact that it was long ago doesn't lessen its significance. Doesn't lessen the pain their losses caused to their loved ones back then. And it doesn't lessen the pain perhaps their descendants feel now. Fathers and sons who just perished for no bloody reason at all. And so I close this by issuing a prayer of remembrance to these lost souls of so long ago. They were just, their humanity and their lives were just as viable as our own. And fate, in its fickle unpredictability, took us away from their loved ones in this world far too soon, or far before their time. Take care and have a great rest of the day. What's up?